So as a country, let us reflect on the year and celebrate the good that is to come.
Welcome to 2020, the year the world changed forever. A year in which 1.6 million people died from COVID-19. Global economies plunged into turmoil, countries locked down, citizens asked to stay at home, governments tested to their limits. And that's just the start of it. This is the story of a year unlike any other. Before most of us had even heard the word COVID-19, wildfires were ravaging Australia, with an estimated 1 billion animals killed. At the end of the month, Public Health England moves the coronavirus risk level from very low to low. And 3 days later, the first COVID patient surfaces in the UK.
On Friday, Mr. Speaker, the Chief Medical Officer announced that 2 patients in England who are members of the same family tested positive for coronavirus. Public Health England is now contacting people who had close contact with these 2 confirmed cases.
January 31st, the UK leaves the EU and the transition period begins. This is the moment that, were it not for coronavirus coming down the tracks, would have defined Boris Johnson's premiership.
This is the moment when the dawn breaks and the curtain goes up on a new act in our great national drama.
As the seriousness of the coronavirus threat begins to unfold, Boris makes his first public appearance in 12 days, at Prime Minister's Questions on February 26th. He has been on a working break at Grace and Favour Home, Chevening. 2 days later, the first Brit dies of coronavirus, a passenger on the Diamond Princess cruise ship. It is the end of the worst week for global stock markets since the 2008 financial crash. March 3rd, Boris Johnson delivers his coronavirus battle plan at the first of what would be many Downing Street press conferences. During the briefing, he says,
I can tell you that I'm shaking hands continuously. I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody.
At this point, if it's not already obvious, it's worth highlighting Boris Johnson's general lack of seriousness when it comes to the pandemic that will go on to kill more than 50,000 Brits and tank the economy. The first corona death on UK soil follows on March 5th. The Downing Street briefings become daily from March 16th. The furlough scheme is announced the day after. Some 10 million people's wages will be paid by the state. And while all this is going on, 250,000 people attend Cheltenham to watch horses run about in a field. Several thousand football fans travel from Spain, then a COVID hotspot, to Liverpool to watch the Champions League knockout stages, and Stereophonics play a packed-out stadium show. As the evidence mounts the NHS will be overwhelmed, the government realises a catastrophe is imminent, and the strategy U-turns. Isolation and suppression, tactics previously described as unscientific, are taken up last minute. Billions of pounds of financial support are announced. For the first time in British history, the state will pay its workers' wages. March 18th, schools are closed indefinitely. That Friday the 20th, after being criticised for not imposing a full lockdown, Boris Johnson orders restaurants and pubs to close.
Been asking people to stay at home during this pandemic. And though huge numbers are complying, and I thank you all, the time has now come for us all to do more. From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
March 26th, the Prime Minister and Rishi Sunak join in the NHS clap-along outside Downing Street. The next day, Boris Johnson says,
I've developed mild symptoms of the coronavirus, that's to say a temperature and a persistent cough, and on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer, I've taken a test that has come out positive.
The assumptions the country built its plan to fight the virus on are collapsing. There's a dual misunderstanding of the situation. The Prime Minister has been making the wrong decisions to fight coronavirus, and failing to follow his own advice, has contracted the disease himself. Johnson stands alone in Downing Street. His smile looks more like a grimace. The next day, an unkempt Prime Minister gives another update.
In my own case, although I'm feeling better and I've done my 7 days of isolation, alas, I still have one of the symptoms, a minor symptom of I still have a temperature.
The first weekend of April is momentous. It begins on the 4th, with Keir Starmer elected the new leader of the Labour Party, as Jeremy Corbyn stands down. Then on the 5th, the Queen delivers a speech to the nation, It's only the fourth time she's done so in her entire reign. She finishes the address with the words, "We will meet again," an echo of the World War II Vera Lynn anthem.
We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
Later that evening, Boris Johnson is admitted to hospital.
This was a precautionary step because he continues to have persistent coronavirus symptoms 10 days after first having tested positive for the virus.
April 6th, Boris is moved to the intensive care unit at St Thomas's Hospital and receives oxygen support. Boris Johnson is eventually discharged from hospital. If he had died, he would have been the first sitting Prime Minister to do so for 154 years. At the end of the month, he says,
I'm sorry I've been away from my desk for much longer than I would have liked. And yet it is also true that we are making progress and real signs now that we are passing through the peak.
On May the 5th, the UK's death toll surpasses Italy. And on May 19th, it's announced Captain Tom Moore will be knighted. That's Sir Tom to you. A reminder, the pandemic did bring some positives. Community spirit, generosity, genuine love for the NHS. But don't go feeling all warm and fuzzy inside just yet, because Downing Street is about to take you for a mug. On May 25th, Dominic Cummings delivered a press conference from Downing Street.
Good afternoon, thank you for coming.
He spoke from a podium positioned at the heart of British power, trying to justify driving 260 miles north with coronavirus symptoms.
Sorry I'm late.
While the rest of the country was attending their relatives' funerals over Skype. By supporting their man, who clearly broke the lockdown, the government drove a Range Rover through all the public goodwill to follow rules. And while the country slept that weekend, an execution took place on the streets of America. That Wednesday, May 28th, the first of many Black Lives Matter protests took place in the UK.
More people would come out if it was carnival. If it was carnival and people were here to bust wine and to have fun and do stupidness, they'll come out their yard and do dumbness. But because we're here to make a change, a lot of people are like, no, you know, I've got too much stuff to do today. This should be the main priority for you to do, not today, but for the rest of your life. Make a change while you can. And that's why I'm here.
And at the end of the month, it's confirmed that May 2020 is the hottest and driest May ever recorded. These balmy nights were punctuated by unlicensed music events and emotive political protests. Initially, they focused on social justice and racial inequality. On June 7th, a statue of slave trader Edward Colston was toppled in Bristol and cast into the harbour. That same weekend, demonstrators targeted the statue of Winston Churchill in Parliament Square and the Cenotaph on Whitehall. This prompted an ugly cocktail of far-right thugs and delusional fantasists to turn out a week later, June 13th, ostensibly to defend these sacred idols. They arrived to find their heroes entombed in metal boxes, so spent the afternoon drinking tinnies, singing 10 German bombers, and accosting the Metropolitan Police and assembled journalists. On June 23rd, we were told lockdown was ending, the great unlocking.
That we will also reopen restaurants and pubs.
How silly we were. July 10th, and planning applications are made for lorry parks near ports to accommodate vehicles delayed transit due to potential Brexit delays. A Farage garage, if you will. And the wearing of face masks in shops is made compulsory. And at the end of the month, the most momentous announcement of 2020 is made. Argos will cease production of their catalogue. In August, the government encourages the public to return to restaurants with its Eat Out to Help Out scheme and begins briefing to certain newspapers office workers could be sacked if they don't return to the workplace.
Don't go to work, go to work. Don't take public transport, go to work, don't go to work.
Soon follows a perfectly timed intervention. A government algorithm to calculate A-level results downgrades 39% of teacher-recommended grades. Uni places are thrown into chaos, and the Department of Education eventually U-turns, but it's too late to unfuck the fucked up. And some of those who didn't initially make their uni offer had their places redistributed. And on August 26th, the worst UK harvest in 40 years is announced. Wheat yields are around 40% lower due to the year's extreme weather. Wake me up when September ends. On the 8th of the month, Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis declares a then unpublished piece of Brexit legislation
break international law in a very specific and limited way.
Cue uproar and outrage. October 3rd is the wettest day on record,
It's October 3rd.
with an average of 31.7 millimetres of rain across the entire country. The new lockdown tier system is announced on October 12th as coronavirus resurges.
There are now more people in hospital with COVID than when we went into lockdown on March the 23rd, and deaths are already rising.
And on October 16th, Boris says trade talks with the EU are effectively over.
After 45 years of membership, they are not willing, unless there's some fundamental change of approach, to offer this country the same terms as Canada.
Which turned out to be a lie. On Halloween, a new national lockdown is announced for England.
The virus is spreading even faster than the reasonable worst-case scenario of our scientific advisors.
At this point, having been through various levels, tiers and national lockdowns, it's become quite apparent that little of the lockdown measures are new or indeed change. Looking at places like Leicester, you'll realise it's all a change in communication strategy. Happy November. Denmark has culled its entire mink population of 17 million animals after they were found to carry a mutated version of the coronavirus. The government later admitted there was no legal basis for the extermination, and then the mink started to rise from their graves. No, really. On November 7th, a little thing called the American election comes into view. Boris Johnson calls Joe Biden to congratulate him on his victory.
This isn't about Republican or Democrat. We had a fascist in the White House who emboldened racism, who put kids in fucking cages with aluminum blankets, and they're still there. Don't forget about that. We got to get them out. Philly says no to fascism. This is the birthplace of democracy. We've had fascists on these streets, Nazis, Confederate flags the last 4 years. You know what? We're done with it. He's out.
November 13th, and Dominic Cummings resigns, making you wonder what the fuck Boris Johnson gained by not sacking him 5 months earlier. On November 25th, Rishi Sunak says the COVID economic emergency has only just begun. It's revealed the economy has contracted by the largest amount for 300 years. December 2nd, here we go, home straight. The UK is the world's first country to approve the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine, and less than a week later, Margaret Keenan gets the jab. Then the nation exploded about how Nigella Lawson pronounced microwave.
In the microwave?
As much as we'd like to leave on a positive there, somehow things got much, much worse. On December 19th, Boris Johnson cancels Christmas.
It is with a very heavy heart, I must tell you, we cannot continue with Christmas as planned.
Millions of people living in London and the South East are put in a new Tier 4 lockdown and banned from mixing indoors. A new strain of COVID is identified, and initial modelling predicts it is 70% more transmissible. Over the weekend, countries begin to close their borders with the UK. France imposes a 48-hour blockade. People and products cannot enter from the United Kingdom, and the port of Dover is closed. A record high number of new infections is recorded. 35,928. Double the number of the previous Sunday. At least we got a trade deal sorted with the EU. That's the last we'll hear about Brexit, I'm sure. So that's it. The end of the year that changed the world. And while we clamour for normality to return, too much has already changed for us to go back. Some change for the better, and with more change to come. Some change for the worse, but we can only hope it's not too late to fix. So goodbye 2020. You will not be missed.